Imagine sitting down to dinner with your family after a long, exhausting day.
Pretty standard scenario for most of us, right?
Right, but like before anyone is allowed to take a single bite of food, someone stands up at the head of the table and reads this incredibly detailed, graphic account of a brutal execution.
Oh, yeah. We're talking flaying, burning, just absolute physical destruction.
Yeah, for most of us, that's a nightmare that would completely ruin our appetite.
Definitely.
But for medieval Dominican monks, this wasn't a nightmare. It was literally just Tuesday.
Yeah, it was an inescapable part of their daily existence. I mean, we like our calendars to be visible, right? Categorized into neat little boxes that we can control.
Like dentist appointments or project deadlines?
Exactly. Safe little grids. But the text we're looking at today completely upends that safe little grid.
Welcome to today's deep dive. Our source material is a 1955 English translation of a foundational centuries-old text. It's called The Martyrology of the Sacred Order of Friars Preachers.
Quite a mouthful.
It really is.
Yeah.
And our mission today is to try to understand the mindset of extreme devotion. We were looking specifically at an excerpt covering January through May.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this isn't just a history book. It's a daily calendar of ultimate sacrifice.
And it is absolutely drenched in blood.
Oh, totally drenched.
To understand what we are dealing with, we first have to define what a martyrology actually is.
Right, like what is its actual function?
It is essentially a liturgical tool. So it's a book that records the deaths, the intense tortures, and these physics-defying miracles of thousands of Christians.
And it's organized chronologically, day by day.
Day by day, yes. And it served as this relentless reminder to the monks and nuns of the staggering price paid by those who came before them.
I am just so fascinated by the actual physical, lived experience of this book, because this wasn't something a monk just casually leafed through in the library, you know, when they had some free time.
No, not at all.
The rubrics, the actual instructions printed in the text, they dictate exactly how this is consumed. Yeah, the reading of the Martyrology was a highly communal, highly regimented act. It was read aloud every single day in the refectory.
That's the communal dining hall of the monastery, right?
Exactly, and it was read right at the very beginning of the evening meal.
And there's this strange time shift to it, too.
Yeah, there is a very specific liturgical rhythm happening here. It is always read a day in advance.
Wait, a day in advance?
Yes. So, as you sit down to eat your evening meal on January 1st, the reader at the front of the room is reciting the gruesome executions that are commemorated on January 2nd.
Okay, wow.
It was explicitly designed to prepare the mind of the community for the liturgical realities of the coming day.
I'm struggling to understand the psychology here, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, if I heard about people being flayed alive or starved in dungeons every single night while I was trying to eat my dinner, I wouldn't feel spiritually inspired.
No.
Honestly, I'd be traumatized. How did this not just mentally break the monks?
What's fascinating here is the psychological juxtaposition. The text doesn't just present raw horror. It wraps this visceral life or death devotion right inside mundane bureaucracy.
What do you mean by mundane bureaucracy?
Well, alongside these visceral stories of death, the book includes highly administrative elements, like the reader has to announce movable feasts.
Okay.
They track the death anniversaries of past master generals of the order, and every single reading concludes with the exact same scripted formula.
Oh, right, the call and response.
Yes. The reader finishes the stories of the day and says, and elsewhere, many other holy martyrs, confessors, and holy virgins. To which the entire choir of monks or nuns responds in unison, thanks be to God.
Wait, let's pause on the movable feasts, because I think to a modern ear that just sounds like religious jargon.
Yeah, it does sound a bit opaque.
What actually is a movable feast, and why is it weird that it's in this blood-soaked book?
So a movable feast is a holy day whose date changes every year. It's tied to the lunar cycle rather than a fixed date on the solar calendar.
Like Easter.
Easter is the most famous example, exactly. But the Martyrology mentions others, like Septuagesima Sunday or Ash Wednesday.
Okay, got it.
Because these dates wander around the calendar year by year, the monastery needed an administrative way to announce when they were happening.
So they were literally using a catalog of extreme torture as their administrative planner.
They really were.
That is wild. It's like combining a terrifying true crime story with an HR memo about upcoming bank holidays.
That is a brilliant way to look at it. By wrapping ultimate sacrifice in administrative procedure, The text integrates the concept of giving your life for your faith into the basic daily routine of eating and living.
It normalizes it.
Exactly. You were hearing about Ash Wednesday shifting dates right next to an account of someone being boiled in pitch. It strips away the shock value and makes martyrdom seem like a perfectly normal, expected part of the calendar.
It sounds like a psychological software patch. If human nature is hardwired for physical survival, the monastery is installing this daily patch to override that instinct.
Yes, a daily override.
They are trauma bonding as a community, sitting shoulder to shoulder, eating their meager meals, and completely resetting their baseline for what actually matters.
It absolutely resets the baseline, and the Dominicans in particular really needed this software patch.
Why them specifically?
Because they were the order of creatures. Their entire mission was to go out into the world, often into deeply hostile territories, to preach against heresy. They were intellectuals, but they needed to be ready to die for their words.
Wow.
So the physical hunger they were satisfying in that dining hall was contrasted sharply with the spiritual hunger of the martyrs who cared nothing for their physical bodies.
But the sheer escalation of torment in this text, I mean, it is mind-boggling. We see martyrs enduring violence inflicted by others, but the text focuses so heavily on the destruction of specific body parts. What is the logic behind the specific violence they are recording?
To understand that, we have to look at the theology of martyrdom. In the worldview of this text, the body is a battlefield.
A battlefield.
Yeah. The state, or the persecutor, uses theatrical violence to try and assert dominance. But the martyr weaponizes their own suffering to prove that earthly power is fundamentally weak.
Can you give me an example from the text?
Let's look at the entry for Pastures. He wasn't a bishop or a famous preacher. He was an overseer of the king's workmen.
Just a regular guy.
Exactly. And his only crime was that he saw another Christian wavering under the threat of death, and he spoke up to encourage him.
And for that, he was killed.
Worse. For that act of defiance, the earthly authorities didn't just kill him. They perforated his neck and they pulled his tongue through the hole.
Ugh, that is horrific. But why the tongue specifically? That feels so intentional.
It is deeply symbolic, and the authors of the martyrology knew exactly what they were doing by including it. Pastures used his tongue to speak words of encouragement, to bolster the faith of a Christian.
So they destroy the instrument of his defiance.
Right. The earthly power destroys the very instrument of that defiance. The state is performing a calculated theatrical kind of violence to say, we control your speech.
But the martyrology flips that narrative entirely. By recording it, the text says, you took his tongue, but his message is literally still being read aloud hundreds of years later in this dining hall.
Exactly. Earthly violence cannot silence divine truth.
I see that theme of weaponizing the body in another entry, too. The text describes a martyr whose flesh is torn off with iron combs while he's suspended from a rack. But the focus isn't even really on his pain.
Ah, you are thinking of Saint Blaise.
Yes, St. Blaise. The text mentions that while his flesh is being torn, 7 women step forward out of the crowd to collect the drops of his blood.
Yes, a very striking image.
And because they do this, they are arrested, tortured, and martyred themselves. It's like this chain reaction of sacrifice.
The detail about the women collecting the blood is crucial for understanding the medieval mindset. In our modern context, blood is a biological fluid. It's a biohazard.
Right, you stay away from it.
But in the reality of the martyrology, the blood of a martyr is a profound spiritual relic. It holds immense power.
So they wanted to gather that power.
Yep. The women aren't just bystanders feeling pity. They recognize that divine power is literally spilling onto the dirt, and they are actively participating in the sanctity of the moment by gathering it.
Blood acting as a spiritual currency. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because the text pushes past just enduring physical destruction into these acts of incredible defiant agency.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm looking at the entry for a Dominican, St. Peter Martyr. He is ambushed and stabbed by heretics, and while he is literally dying on the ground, bleeding to death, he doesn't cry out for a doctor.
No, he does something much more profound.
He uses his own blood as ink to write out the Catholic doctrine he was defending right onto the ground.
St. Peter Martyr writing in his own blood is the perfect encapsulation of this entire worldview. His body is failing. The earthly power has, for all intents and purposes, won the physical battle.
Right, he is dying.
But he uses the very substance of his physical destruction, his lifeblood, to permanently record his spiritual truth. It's the ultimate subversion of the persecutor's power.
It's like he's saying, you think you're killing me, but you're actually just providing the ink for my final sermon.
That's a great way to put it.
It's an incredible level of agency. But speaking of agency, There is one story in this text that genuinely confused me, because it seems to break the rules of their own theology. The text takes a sudden, much darker turn when a martyr decides to initiate her own death.
You are referring to St. Apollonia.
Yes. Her entry says the executioners knock out all her teeth, and then they build this massive fire.
A terrible scene.
And they threaten to burn her alive unless she renounces her faith. But she doesn't even wait for them to push her in. She suddenly tears herself out of their grip and voluntarily leaps into the flames herself.
Right.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't suicide or self-destruction strictly forbidden in Catholic theology? How is she considered a saint if she killed herself?
Yeah, that is a highly complex entry, and you've hit on a major theological puzzle that the church grappled with for centuries.
Because you generally can't do that.
Yeah. Generally, you are absolutely correct. You cannot take your own life. So her jumping into the fire presents a massive problem for the authors of the Martyrology. I mean, if she despaired and killed herself to escape the pain, she committed a grave sin.
So how do they justify including her in a daily reading meant to inspire monks?
The text handles it very carefully by framing her action with a specific, explicit theological caveat. It notes that she was, and I quote, kindled within by the greater fire of the Holy Spirit.
Ah, so it wasn't her own idea.
Precisely. Her jumping into the flames isn't framed as an act of despair or a desire to escape suffering. It is framed as an act explicitly guided and, in fact, demanded by the Holy Spirit.
It's like a divine exception to the rule.
Yes. And think about the psychological impact on her persecutors. They are using the threat of the fire to terrorize her, to assert control.
But by jumping involuntarily, she completely strips them of their power.
Exactly. They realize she is far more ready to meet death than they are to inflict it.
That brings up a fascinating transition in the text. We see these martyrs totally defying the limits of physical endurance. But the martyrology doesn't stop at the defiance of pain. It moves into the defiance of natural laws altogether.
It really does shift gears.
Yeah, if these people can override their biological survival instincts, the text suggests they can also override physics.
We are moving from the acts of the martyrs to the miracles associated with them.
Exactly, and some of these entries are wild. It feels like they are claiming that natural laws like gravity or solid matter are just gentle suggestions.
Give me an example.
Take St. Raymond of Peñafort. The text says he needed to cross the sea to get back to Barcelona, but instead of chartering a boat, he just spread his cloak out on the water, stood on it, and miraculously sailed across the sea.
As one does.
Right. And when he arrived at his monastery, he didn't even knock. He just walked right through the closed, locked doors.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to understand the foundational worldview operating within this text. To a modern reader, a man sailing on a coat sounds absurd, like a fairy tale.
Oh, totally. It sounds like magic.
But in the reality of the martyrology, the physical world is entirely subordinate to the spiritual one. The laws of nature buoyancy, the solidity of wood and iron are not absolute truths.
They're more like local ordinances.
Yes, I like that. They are simply rules that God put in place to govern the mundane world. And because God is the author of those rules, God can suspend them at any moment to validate the truth of the faith.
So the miracles aren't magic tricks.
No, they're divine endorsements.
It reminds me of the movie The Matrix. In that movie, once the main character realizes that the physical world around him is just a simulation, that it's governed by a base code, he can suddenly dodge bullets and jump across buildings.
Right, because he sees past the code.
Exactly. The physical rules no longer apply to him because he is operating on a higher level of reality. The martyrology seems to be saying the exact same thing. Once you align yourself perfectly with the spiritual code of the universe, you can walk through walls.
That analogy works perfectly. The miracles prove that God actively intervenes in the physical world to protect or assist his followers, completely bypassing the code of earthly physics.
And it gets even more surreal when that intervention is used to undo earthly violence. I'm thinking of St. Herculanus. He is a bishop who is beheaded by the king of the Goths.
A very definitive punishment.
It is the ultimate assertion of earthly military dominance. The king removes his head to prove who is in charge. But the text says that 40 days later, his severed head is found miraculously reattached to his body, as if the sword had never touched it.
Again, we have to look at the why behind this story. Why a reattached head?
To reverse the king's action.
Exactly. It is about rendering the king's ultimate punishment completely null and void. The king of the Goths can separate the head from the body, but God can just put it back together.
Wow.
It is a profound theological statement to those monks eating their dinner. It says earthly kings actually have no ultimate jurisdiction. Physical death is an illusion, a temporary inconvenience, and spiritual wholeness is eternal.
My favorite example of this spiritual reality completely invading the physical world is the story of Saint Ardelion. Because it's not a physical healing or a levitation, it's a miraculous, instantaneous change of mind.
The conversion of the actor.
Yes, Saint Ardelion isn't a monk. He isn't a bishop. He is literally on a stage in a theater, performing a comedy that is actively mocking Christian sacred rites.
Right, he's actively making fun of them.
The crowd is laughing, he is playing his part, and right there, mid-performance, he is suddenly converted on the spot.
It is a stunning narrative moment.
It really is. He breaks character, stops the play, and professes his new faith in Christ to the completely stunned audience.
And the state is so threatened by this sudden shift that he is immediately martyred for it.
Right, sealing his new faith with his blood. It is the ultimate breaking of the fourth wall.
What that story communicates to the listener is that no one and nowhere is beyond the reach of the spiritual reality. St. Ardelion is actively mocking the concept of spiritual truth, and the truth forcefully breaks into his reality anyway.
That's incredible.
It can interrupt a theatrical comedy just as easily as it can sustain a man being tortured on a rack.
When you lay it all out like this, the trauma bonding, the weaponization of the body, the subversion of physics, it really makes you think about the cumulative weight of this book. Imagine the psychological fortitude of the monks and nuns who consume this text year after year.
It forced them to constantly evaluate their own devotion. I mean, if St. Apollonia can jump into a fire under the guidance of the Holy Spirit, can I not endure the minor inconveniences of my vow of poverty?
Right, it puts things in perspective.
Exactly. If St. Peter Martyr can write doctrine in his own blood while dying on the dirt, can I not manage to stay awake for midnight prayers in the chapel? It shrank their personal grievances down to nothing.
So what does this all mean for us? When we pull ourselves out of that 13th century dining hall and look at our own lives today, we live in a modern world of relative comfort.
Very comfortable compared to this, yes.
We are surrounded by information overload, we are highly protective of our boundaries, and we are safe in our routines. But this deep dive challenges us. It asks a really uncomfortable, piercing question. What ideas, what beliefs, or what truths do you hold today that you would sacrifice your physical comfort for?
It's a tough question to answer.
Because this entire catalog is built on the premise that physical comfort is the absolute least important thing in the universe.
This raises an important question, and to explore it, I want to bring in one final fascinating detail from the source text that we haven't touched on yet.
Oh, what's that?
The martyrology doesn't just feature people who were killed by others. On January 5th, the text commemorates a man named Saint Simeon, who is surnamed Stylites.
Stylites. What does stylites mean?
The Greek word stylos means pillar. Saint Simeon was a monk who, in order to pursue ultimate devotion and perfectly align himself with God, left society entirely. He went into the desert and lived for years isolated on the very top of a towering pillar.
Wait, he just lived on top of a stone column in the desert, completely alone.
Yes. For decades, he endured the extreme heat, the freezing nights, the elements, and profound total isolation, removed from the earth itself.
That is just, I can't even imagine that.
Now, compare that extreme solitary isolation of St. Simeon on his column to the communal experience of the Dominicans we've been analyzing.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
The friars' preachers are sitting together, shoulder to shoulder in a refectory. They are eating a meal as a group, listening to the story of Simeon's extreme isolation being read aloud as part of their shared communal routine.
Wow. That is a massive paradox. You have a community using a story of total isolation to bind themselves closer together.
It is a profound tension, and it leaves us with something vital to consider about the nature of conviction. Does true, ultimate devotion require you to separate yourself entirely from the world, elevating yourself above the noise like Simeon on his pillar?
Or does it require community?
Exactly. Does it require you to immerse yourself in a community that shares your convictions, like the Dominicans breaking bread while listening to the martyrs? Where is the truest expression of belief found in solitary, silent endurance, or in a shared communal identity?
That is something to really sit with. You look at your own daily planner, that safe little grid of meetings, gym sessions, and grocery trips, and you realize how far removed we are from both Simeon on his pillar and those monks in their refectory. The martyrology isn't just a record of the past, it's an absolute confrontation with what it means to believe in something greater than your own survival. Just a little something for you to ponder the next time you sit down with your family for dinner.